Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive, and welcome back to the next episode of what I talk about when I talk about dungeon diving. And this is kind of a big one, right? The topic for today's conversation is exploration. This is a huge topic in this genre, and any number of the points I'm going to talk about today could probably be broken into their own episode or sub-episode, and eventually they probably will be because there's a lot to talk about. But I wanted to get this episode done right now because of a game I have on the table right now. It's a preview I'm doing, a prototype preview for a game that just unfortunately had a rough time on Kickstarter, but it's going to be back. And that game is Forgotten Depths. And I've been meaning to do this episode for quite some time. And this game just kind of like exploded my imagination and really made me think about this topic, the topic of exploration in a dungeon crawl, in a fantasy adventure game, and how important that is to so many players, and how so many different games tackle that mechanism, tackle that idea of exploration in different ways. And I think Forgotten Depths might actually do it as good, if not better, than any other game I've played, except for maybe one. We'll have to see. The one I'm talking about, let's back up a little bit. My favorite all-time game of exploration isn't even a dungeon crawl. It's not even a fantasy game at all. It is, if I can reach back here for a moment, it is Lost Valley from Pandasaurus Games. This is a game about the Yukon Gold Rush, and it handles exploration in a very almost abstract way. There's no fighting, there's no leveling up, you don't have any characters, there's not even like a single sentence really of lore to discover. But after I play Lost Valley, I feel like I've been on an expedition in a foreign land. And by foreign, I don't mean in another country. I mean foreign in like a fantastical sense, in a land that is alien to me. I would love if somebody rethemed Lost Valley into a fantasy setting, and I almost get that, almost, with Forgotten Depths. We're going to get back to Forgotten Depths. But the idea of exploration in a board game is kind of a weird thing. None of these games really have exploration because they are finite. The elements are contained in a box. There are only a certain number of things, so it's not like you're going to be able to go out and discover new things all the time. You will be exploring similar terrain often, but there are games that create the illusion of exploration better than others. And I think that is what is the most important aspect of this topic, is games that create an illusion of exploration. And I kind of put in 5 categories the things that are important to me in a game that creates an illusion of exploration like the best, right? So, number 1, it's the illusion that anything can happen. So again, we know that in a game with finite components, that is not possible, that anything can happen. In an RPG where the only limit is somebody's imagination, something like that can happen. But in these games, in board games, in games that are contained within a box with finite components, it's not possible for anything to happen. However, there are some games that either, one, have enough components to where statistically that is kind of true, because you could play the game forever practically and not ever see the same combination of things. And a game that does that, of course, is Shadows of Brimstone, which has more cards to encounter than 10 other games and all of their expansions combined. Shadows of Brimstone has stacks on stacks on stacks of exploration cards, of non-combat encounters, of stat tests, of little narrative snippets. It has so much stuff. Every time I play Shadows of Brimstone, I never know what I'm going to encounter, because every time I play it, I take my whole stack of like encounter cards and I shuffle them. You know, I don't keep the same stack going from game to game. And sometimes I will see the same one. I'm always shuffling, just so there's always a chance that I will discover something new, and there's always a chance that to keep those new things, always it feels like maybe just a little bit out of reach. So there's always something new to discover. I think another game that does this really well, and I'm hoping that the upcoming sequel is as well, is Secrets of the Lost Tomb and Secrets of the Lost Station, to be coming out soon. Again, that game has a ton of non-combat and combat encounters and cards, and the adventures and the misadventures, and the way those come out during the game. It really feels like when you're on an adventure in those games that you know, the sky's the limit as far as like the crazy weird stuff that can happen. So that was the illusion that anything can happen, I feel, elevates an idea of exploration in a game. The second is a game's ability to create a sense of mystery. One game that I think does this incredibly well is Warhammer Quest Silver Tower. I'm going to be doing some videos on Silver Tower as kind of an extension of my super in-depth Warhammer Quest series, because I think Silver Tower, now this is going to be blasphemous to some people, but I think Silver Tower is actually a better board game than Warhammer Quest, the original. It's not as expansive, it's not as robust, it's not as wild, and I probably would rather play the original Warhammer Quest. But as far as like a game's ability to tell a concise story, and it's super focused, and the mechanisms are very good, I think. Warhammer Quest Silver Tower is great, and one of the things that makes it so great is the sense of mystery, because you are kind of solving a mystery while you're playing that game. You're working through this scenario book, and you're having just like, there are random encounters. And excuse me a sec, I need to go close my door so my dogs don't bark. All right, back. So, Tower, right? It really creates a sense of mystery, from the art to the world you're exploring to how the story unfolds. It makes me feel like I'm in this weird otherworldly environment. Another one that's not really a dungeon crawl, but it is an adventure game, is Tales of the Arabian Nights. I mean, that game does the sense of mystery with its giant book of tales, where you're constantly discovering new things and wild adventures that you're having. And then the last game I want to mention for that is the first game I actually did. I think the first game I did a playthrough. One of my bigger playthrough series really early on this channel was City of Chaos. Talk about a mystery. Man, I am still thinking about that game. I want to get that game back to the table, utilizing the new kind of house rules I have to play the entire game, because I am still thinking about the adventure I had during that time I played it, and a lot of that has to do with the mystery, has to do with figuring out what is going on in the city. So that was create a sense of mystery. Another way that games create a feeling of exploration is through unpredictable map layouts. And so this is kind of like laying tiles as you're playing. You know, you don't have preset dungeons. You have dungeons that you never know what's around the next corner. Forgotten Depths does this through this really unique system that it almost feels like you're surveying a land, and the game designer calls it an ecology. It almost feels like you're land surveyors in here, or kind of like Etrian Odyssey, the video games. But yeah, so you're laying down tiles and you're going down corridors, and by the end of the game you can like stand up and look at your table and have a cool dungeon layout. Warhammer Quest does this, Shadows of Brimstone, Dungeon Quest, Darklight, Memento Mori, what else? The D&D adventure games. There are a lot of games that do this with the randomly generated dungeons. And those are always fun because you never know what you're going to expect. You put the game on the table and who knows where that thing is going to end up. Sometimes you have to move the whole thing around the table. Sometimes you have to add I've had it in Secrets of the Lost Tomb. I've had to add like a second table just to hold the map. So that's unpredictable map layouts. A fourth way that games give a feeling of exploration is, I think, it's a balance of combat and non-combat encounters. And by that I mean, it's when you are faced with an encounter, when you're faced with a random situation, you just don't know what it's going to be. Warhammer Quest does this well. Secrets of the Lost Tomb, again. These are games that, sometimes you might be fighting a lot, and sometimes you might not be fighting. Darklight Memento Mori, somebody commented that on my playthrough, like, wow, that game is kind of boring. And yeah, sometimes a game of Warhammer Quest or Darklight or Shadows of Brimstone, those Warhammer derivative games, sometimes they can be kind of uneventful. But in my mind, that is how the life of an adventurer would be. You might be combing through the hills trying to find a dungeon, and you finally find it and there's nothing in there. The creatures have moved out. All of the treasure has been already looted, and you might just be walking around some empty corridors, and that's fine because who knows what's going to be around the next corner. And that leads me to the fifth way I think that games have a sense of exploration, and that is a sense of discovery, of finding new things, of feeling like an explorer. And probably the best game I can say for this is, of course, Seventh Continent, which you are an explorer in that game. And the weird thing about that game is your character has actually already explored the land. So you kind of have this map, but then you're having to piece together the map from almost like fragments of your memory. And as you start piecing together the map, and you actually revisit the same map on multiple games, and you get to know the area, and your sense of discovery pays off in that it adds knowledge to the player. And so that's a game that is, a lot of these games, the knowledge that you're gaining while you're exploring doesn't really translate to the player, but in Seventh Continent it does. And that also is true about Forgotten Depths, because in Forgotten Depths has an amazing mechanism for this sense of discovery, and it's something that I wish I would have thought of to put in my game that I'm designing, because I think this is one of the most fantastic elements I've ever seen in a game like this. While you're exploring these different ecologies in that game, you're looking for these places called legendary locations. And the legendary locations are marked by a certain shape of tiles, almost like a tetramino, almost like a Tetris style shape. And there's these nodes that connect these certain shapes together. And so when you are laying out your tiles, mapping your surroundings, it's almost like the characters have an idea of maybe where one of these legendary locations are. The player has the knowledge of the shape of that location. And so when you're laying out your tiles, you have to be really careful about how you lay out the tiles in order for you, the player, to be able to create that shape on the map. And that is so cool. It's almost like a tile laying mini game within a dungeon adventure style game. And it's almost like a fourth wall breaking sense of exploration, because you, the player, actually have to do something in order for the characters to get the chance to explore one of those locations. Like, my mind was just blown when I saw that. Such a great idea. So there are a lot of different ways that we've talked about different ways to create the sense of exploration, right? So we have the laying of map tiles, building and discovering a map as you go. Advanced Hero Quest may be the best of this game, because that's kind of like what the whole game is, right? It's like a roguelike where you are just going, especially in the solo version, you are just creating a completely randomly generated map. Secrets of the Lost Tomb, again. Dungeon Quest, again, that game is another kind of like roguelike. Roguelike video games seem to be like this too, because they're randomly generated. The assets, you're never going to see the same tiles next to each other. There are narrative elements, and narrative elements create a sense of exploration by, tickling your imagination and getting you to think about things that your character is seeing. Those kinds of, City of Chaos, Mice and Mystics does this through its story. Ryan Laukatt's Near and Far does that pretty well, I think, too. There's some narrative elements that you're reading while your character is exploring the land. They can do that through art. The Seventh Continent, the art plays a huge part. You really have to look at the map and examine the art. It comes with a magnifying glass to find little secrets. Dungeon Degenerates does this. Even though the map is all laid out, you can see everything. The art on the cards and in the various storybooks and the art on the map, it creates these evocative moments. And the way that the different the different environments, like the swamp and the forest and the red valley, I can't remember what it's called, but the different environments, the way that the art depicts them being different, does create this sense of moving around and exploring different areas. And then there's also, of course, encounter cards, and Shadows of Brimstone, Darklight, Memento Mori, Dungeon Degenerates, Warhammer Quest. All of the Warhammer Quest derivatives do this through encounter cards, and having that's a idea where it's kind of like the more components you have, the more you're going to have this sense of exploration, because as your stack of random encounters grows, as your books of random encounters grow, you will have a better chance of discovering something new. So I'm just gonna some gold star. These are some gold star examples of games with exploration that we've already touched on, but I just wanted to list them here. Lost Valley, Seventh Continent, Shadows of Brimstone, Warhammer Quest, City of Chaos, Tales of the Arabian Nights, Secrets of the Lost Tomb, Darklight, Memento Mori, Forgotten Depths, which I've talked about, Blackstone Fortress. Blackstone Fortress is cool. That there's not you're constantly exploring new areas, and you have to go back to your home ship and then come back. And it has like this legacy element where your characters are discovering clues that will help them get deeper and deeper into the Blackstone Forest. I like that a lot. And then Mice and Mystics, I think, has that sense of exploration. But that one, the sense of exploration, I think, drops off the quickest, just because its exploration is so intricately tied to its narrative that you can really only get, I think, that first playthrough is the best playthrough of Mice and Mystics. And then, of course, there are a few upcoming games. I mentioned Ryan Laukatt earlier with Near and Far, and his game called Sleeping Gods coming out. Looks amazing. Like I'm so hoping that he has finally. I want to get a video of Near and Far done, because I have a lot of issues with the game. I think it has a lot of problems similar to Fallout, the board game. but I also think it does a lot of good things. And I'm really hoping that he's nailed the problems I had with Near and Far and honed them and developed something really special with Sleeping Gods. Another one, I think, from a Japanese creator that's coming out early next year. It was supposed to be out this month, but that's called Map Maker Adventures. And it is kind of like, I would say it's kind of like 4 Against Darkness or D100 Dungeons, where it's a map making game and you play with graph paper and you have a book, and it's kind of like a single player RPG type thing where the whole point of the game is to map dungeons. Kind of, again, it makes sense that it's from like a Japanese developer because, again, it's kind of like that Etrian Odyssey style, those old kind of school Japanese video game dungeon crawls. And then, of course, Dungeon Universalis. Slight delay on that one. They had some troubles with the translation, so they are reprinting like a whole stack of cards. That one, too, I think is going to have a great sense of exploration with all of its components and just the way that you can have randomly generated dungeons. So yeah, trying to think if there's anything offhand that I missed. I mean, I know there's a ton of stuff that I haven't talked about. Games that there's so many, right? This is a super important topic in this genre. And I think some games do it much better. Some games don't do it as well. Some games do it differently with cards or with tiles or with books. And I know I do want to dive back into this topic in more detail. I could take like each one of these points and I'd probably make like a top 5 game for it. So what games do you guys think, really capture a sense of exploration? What games give you guys the sense of mystery, of discovery, and what elements, what mechanisms do you enjoy the most to create that sense of exploration? Let me know in the comments, and if there's something that I didn't miss that you think, oh my God, how could you have forgotten this game? Let me know. I'm hoping to explore some new games, some new territories. So please make some suggestions, and so I can try out some new games, and hopefully there's some things with some different mechanisms that maybe I haven't experienced. Because just as I like my characters and as a player, I like to explore elements in games. Outside of that, as a game player, I like to explore new games. So again, there's kind of like this weird, like fourth wall kind of meta nature of this topic, because when I'm at the table, my imagination likes to explore the game, but then when I'm in the real world, me, Daniel, likes to explore different elements of these board games. So all right guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.